Welcome to Debt Negotiator Pro. 15 years of experience of debt collections, right? Whether I owned the debt collection company or I worked for them, 99% of the time I was negotiating debt. I've taken that 15 years of experience, broken it down into a step-by-step 5 video course to teach you to become a debt negotiator pro. So check out the link down below with regards to that. Today, I want to talk about debt negotiations as far as when you finally are at the point where you're about to start negotiating your debt with that debt collector. But before I get into that, there are a few household items that I just want to get knocked out in the beginning so we can have that done. Now, remember, free letter bundle down below. You get a free goodwill letter, cease and desist letter, as well as a pay to delete letter. This is to help you guys on your journey. They're templates. All you do is just plug in your information. That's down there. The second thing that I want to say is if your credit score is in the 4s, the 5s, or 600s, low 600s, and you're looking at getting credit repair, chances are you do need credit repair. Down below, sign up for a free consultation, 20-minute consultation with me. We can assess where you're at, figure out what's going on with your credit, and figure out what your goals are and so forth so that we can get you there. Everybody's credit is different. It's almost like a fingerprint. So what works for some people don't work for everybody. So the reality is that's why that I have those consultations so that way you can fill out the information with regards to that. Lastly, Ask a Debt Collector, those of you who follow me on YouTube, Ask a Debt Collector is the name of the YouTube. I am starting a podcast. That should be up within the next 2 to 3 business days. I will definitely put a link in all the videos that I have coming out with regards to that. And then next Monday, I will be talking about American Express, right? American Express business card, the mistakes that I made, so that you can avoid those same mistakes with regards to that. Now, with Debt Negotiator Pro, the section that I want to talk about is actually settling out your accounts. That's the main thing, right? If you buy Debt Negotiator Pro, the actual course, one of the main things that you guys or anybody who's purchased this course, you're looking at the negotiations. One of the things that I want to talk about today is simple. I want to talk about your attitude. I cannot tell you how many people, from the time of working through collections, when you get a consumer on the phone, they have a bad attitude. Attitude is everything when it comes to negotiating your debt. The reason why I say that is simple. I was a collector, and I understand if you as a consumer are calling me to pay your debt that you actually owe, and you call in with a bad attitude, being rude, chances are you're not going to get a good settlement. I can tell you how many countless times where I've had a person call in with a bad attitude, and because they had a bad attitude when it comes to negotiating that debt and giving some type of settlement, I play hardball. I won't give a settlement. And then the consumer, what do they say? Oh, I want to talk to the manager. I want to talk to your supervisor. And all we do is place you on hold, probably ask our friend that's sitting right next to us to act like he is a manager, tell them that we're not going to settle, tell them they're not going to settle your account, get them on the phone, have them talk to you with regards to your account, and basically not give you a settlement. So attitude is everything. I've had people call in and have an awesome attitude with regards to their debt, right? And because they had a good attitude, right off the bat, I will knock off large amounts of the debt. Now, depending on the circumstance, how old the debt is, when the date of last payment was and so forth, all of that matters. And the reason why that matters is the newer the debt, the higher the premium that was paid for that debt. So what do I mean by that? If you had a Capital One credit card, I always use Capital One just because it's such a universal credit card, even though I'm not a big fan of them. Nevertheless, if you get a Capital One credit card and it's defaulted, it was sent to collections, and it's within that first year, chances are me as a debt buyer, if I'm purchasing that debt, of course it's not bought just your one account. The accounts are purchased in bulk. But if your account came in the package of accounts that I bought, typically the newer the account is, the higher the premium is on paying. We're talking, it can be upwards of 25 cents on the dollar for that account. But nevertheless, the older the debt is, the cheaper it's become, especially if it's changed hands. So we talked about the chain of command. If you call, you go to the original creditor, Capital One, it's sold to this debt collection company, then it's sold to another debt collection company, and it's sold to another debt collection company. The older the account is, typically the least amount that the person is paid for your debt, meaning the chances of you getting a settlement are greater the older the debt is, because they paid a lot less for that portfolio or that account in particular. But even when it's old, if you have a bad attitude, trust and believe a debt collector is not going to settle out the account. This is what makes Debt Negotiator Pro a better, I would say, a better course project than a lot of them out there, because I'm giving you the inside scoop on how debt collectors think, because I was a debt collector. I've trained many debt collectors. And one of the things that I would say is you as a debt collector are in discretion of this person's settlement, right? So if you are trying to get an account taken care of because you're trying to buy a home, or you're trying to, get a new credit card, or you're trying to get a brand new car, when you call these places, you're gonna have to have a good attitude. Whether the debt is old or new, you're gonna have to have a good attitude. And I know that it's hard as a consumer sometimes, because you're thinking that all debt collectors are bad, or they're upset, or they're all about getting their money, which is true, right? You owe $3,000, a good debt collector is going to try and get $3,000 from you. But depending on the story and how your attitude is, it'll determine a lot with regards to that account. Obviously, there are other factors, but the attitude is very, very key. So make sure your attitude is right when it comes to settling out your accounts. The next thing that I want to talk about with regards to paying your debt is vetting companies. I can't stress to you how important it is to actually vet the company. I know it doesn't make sense, right? You owed on the Capital One credit card. A company calls you saying that you own the Capital One credit card. You know that was the Capital One credit card that you had, and maybe you were meaning to pay it. And so a company calls you randomly, say, hey, you have this Capital One credit card. You owe $1,000. How are you able to pay that? That's one of the things they always say, right? How do you want to take care of that today? And the reality is, you don't want to just automatically pay right then and there. You want to vet the company. You want to look up the company and make sure that the company is a legit company, right? What do I mean by that? Do a quick Google search. Google search the name of the company, or reverse search the number. Now, there's a thin line between people saying fraudulent and the company's no good and actually vetting the company. One of the things you have to realize is it's a debt collection company. I've worked for 3 different debt collection companies over the course of that 15 years. Every single one of them has had a bunch of complaints and people saying fraud, even though the company was a legit company. It's debt collections. Most people do not like them. And so a lot of times debt collectors are sort of kind of rude as a whole. As a rule of thumb, most of them are going to be rude because they're dealing with consumers that are constantly telling them why they can't pay and making up reasons and excuses why they can't pay, making promises to pay and then not actually paying it, and then ignoring you and all types of stuff. So as a rule of thumb, a lot of times they are going to be a little hard to deal with. But you as the consumer, when you're paying, look up the company. And because the company says, there's a bunch of complaints on there saying, oh, this is a fraudulent company. I don't like this company. They're telling me they're going to pay or sue or whatever the circumstance is. That's not actually finding out if the company is legit, right? With regards to that. Every debt collection company that I've owned, the 2 that I've owned, we've had a plethora of complaints when it comes to your debt. But on the flip side, we've gotten some good reviews, and that's because I've asked for them. I used to be backed by the Better Business Bureau, and anytime someone would pay, I would ask them how the experience was, and a lot of times they say it was good, and I would tell them to put up a good review. You can't just go by what is being said on the internet, because 99% of debt collection companies are going to show bad stuff. But the things that you want to look for is an actual website. Look up the company. See if they have a website. When you look at that website, look and see if you can get some names of the owner. If they have an in-house attorney, and a lot of times they'll have a way where you can pay online. Look up that information. And then the next thing you're going to want to do is go to the Secretary of State in your area, right? So if you're in in California, you can look up the Secretary of State and look up the name of the company and do a reverse search and see if the company actually has a license in your state and if their articles of information and so forth, if the status is active. Because if it's not active, they shouldn't be contacting you in that state. So those are the things you have to look at. Try and stay away from the looking at, the complaints. This is not Yelp or Better Business Bureau or something like that, where people are giving you a service when it comes to, like buying shoes or buying clothes or, services from a credit union or something along those lines. It's debt collections. Chances are most people, including myself, I don't want to pay them. And so the attitude is always a lot different. But as a consumer, one of the things you have to realize is you got the credit card. Yes, no one reads the small print, including myself a lot of times when you're filling out the stuff for a credit card, for instance, your Capital One credit card. It specifically states you have late payments, they're going to hit you with all kinds of fees. If you, if you have late payments, if you skip payments, if things happen and the account goes to collections, it's not the collector's fault. And I'm not on anyone's side. I just know both sides. I understand. There are rude collectors out there. I know. As a rule of thumb, there are rude people. And as a rule of thumb, when it comes to consumers, sometimes you guys are rude when it comes to paying your debt. But it changes with the attitude. But as far as the company goes, and what I was talking about before I went on a tangent, is it's key that you find out the company that's calling you, that they're legit. And a lot of times you want to just look at the Secretary of State in your state and make sure that they have an active status on their LLC or whatever the circumstance is. Look up the website. Companies that don't have a website sometimes can be shady. Doesn't mean everyone has to have a website, but for the most part, debt collection companies out there should have a website that you can actually look at and vet. And then, you can look up some of the people on the website to, see, what's being said about them. Another thing, debt collection companies are sued. They make mistakes just like any other company, so you can't look at that. One of the things that determine whether someone paid me when I had a debt collection company, I remember one of the first things they would do was look online and say, oh, your company is not this or your company's that, or it's legit or it's not legit, or whatever the circumstance is with regards to your debt. Vet the information. Now, if they're calling from another state, right? A lot of times debt collection companies are calling from a different area code that's not familiar to your surrounding area. Look up that company in their state. So when you look up the Secretary of State, if you're in California, they're calling you from Nevada, you want to look up the Secretary of State in Nevada to make sure that their license is active, right, with regards to the account. Then another thing you're going to want to do is look and see if they have a license to collect in your state. Now, every state varies. Some states don't require a license to collect. Some states do. The only way that you can find that out is by Googling. Say, hey, is there, in order to collect debt in whatever state that you're at, do you have to have a license? Does a company have to have a license? And typically through the Google search, you'll find that information with regards to that. And then if it states that they have to have a license, when you're talking to the person, the debt collector, you can ask them those type of questions. Now, understand something though. When you start getting technical with the debt collector, they still have the power with regards to the negotiation side. So tread lightly in that aspect. And so what do I mean by tread lightly? When you call them up, you can't be like, oh, do you have a license to collect in my state? Do you da-da-da-da-da? You can, but just understand, if they have all their proper paperwork to collect in your state, when it comes to your debt, the attitude matters a lot. So I would take the approach of, hey, there's a lot of fraud going on. Jimmy, or whoever you're talking to, the debt collector, say his name, whatever the circumstance is. A lot of times they're using a fake name anyways. But Jimmy, and I just want to make sure that I'm paying the correct company. So there's just a few questions that I may have concerning that. Then in that case, the debt collector at that time span, now you've broken that barrier of them thinking you're lying and vice versa. So then in that case, for the most part, every collector, once they hear that, they're going to understand that. This day and age, with all the fraud and all the stuff that goes on, okay, well, what do you need? And then the questions you want to ask is do you guys have a license to collect in my state? That may make them mad, it may not, but any professional will understand the situation. And then you can ask for proof of that, right? And then you want to make sure that they're a legit company, right? And you want to make sure that they are actually the correct company to actually be collecting on your debt. And sometimes a debt validation letter will help with regards to that, and that's something you can send before negotiating or anything along those lines concerning your debt. But if you want to save money on your accounts, a rule of thumb, which is very, very easy to understand, is something simple. When you're calling them up, have a good attitude. Obviously, you want to protect yourselves. Obviously, they want to protect themselves and make sure that they don't incriminate themselves or do anything that breaks FDCA rules. And then once you finally get through that minutia, stay calm. Even if the collector gets upset or gets frustrated or starts yelling, you can always still be professional. Understand, we have this thing in society right now where it's all about matching energy. And I'm not a big fan of that. But don't get me wrong, especially at home with my wife and my kids and so forth, I be matching energy. And I have to work on that. We have to work on that. Don't match energy, especially when it's negative. If it's positive, yes, let's match that energy. But if it's negative, try and stay positive, right? Say, hey, I understand. Hey, you're yelling, or hey, I get what's going on. I know it's frustrating and so forth. I want to get this thing taken care of. Your job is to get the money for it to be taken care of, but ultimately we want to come to something that we can both agree upon when it comes to settling your accounts. Debt Negotiator Pro has a lot of that stuff covered and more. $197 is the price now. They're not trying to scare anybody. The price is going to go up. It's worth a lot more than $197. Not only will you get the five videos in the course on step-by-step how to negotiate your debt, there's so many nuances that a lot of people don't think about when negotiating their debt. And so a lot of times it's easier to hire someone to do so. And if you want to pay a premium and hire me, feel free to do so. Sign up for a 20-minute free consultation and we can work that out. If you want to do it on your own and do exactly what it is that I'm saying, step by step, you have that access with Debt Negotiator Pro. I call it Debt Negotiator Pro because once you learn the steps, you will become a pro. Just as good as me. 15 years condensed down. It shouldn't take you, depending on, your schedule and what's going on. I believe it may be a total, all 5 videos may be a total of about an hour and a half. So if you break it down, you do what you need to do, take notes on what it is that you have to do and set it all up, you will be well off to negotiating your debt and being a Debt Negotiator Pro and saving yourself a lot of money on your debt. That's the key thing, right? That's the whole point of Debt Negotiator Pro. A lot of times, when you hire somebody to do it, you're going to pay them a premium on top of still having to settle out the account, right? I'm not a big advocate on debt consolidation. Same situation. You're paying a monthly fee to a company. They're going to take a piece of that fee and then distribute the rest of the money to, depending on how much debt you have. And depending on how much debt you have will determine how much monthly they're going to charge you. And majority of their fees are based on how much debt you have and how much money that they're going to take out of that debt. And then basically you're paying monthly, let's say $200, $300 a month. They're going to take $50 to $100 of that for their fees. And then the remaining amount they're going to stack aside. And if you have like 4 or 5 accounts, they're going to break up the money and send checks to each one of those creditors. The only problem with that is if that debt collection company wants to sue you, even though you're paying the small amount of payment. If you're paying $25, they've taken that money and they're paying $25 towards your debt of $10,000. A lot of times debt collection companies, if they have an in-house attorney or they can outsource the information with regards to that, they'll file suit. I've seen that happen so many times, and the debt consolidation company can't stop that from happening, number one. And then on the debt negotiation side, sometimes similar. They may take a certain amount, wait till your money gets bulked up, take a percentage out of that, and then try and settle out your account. I used to be a debt collector, and I remember getting those calls. Debt consolidation is a lot less easier because they're just going to take whatever it is and give you the money. They want the address to where you're at, your account number and so forth, and then they'll send the money. Now, if you default, not only will you end up owing the debt consolidation company, you're going to end up owing all that debt because of interest and so forth. And so those small payments don't work out. But with a debt negotiating company, typically you're going to either give them a lump sum of money and then try and have them negotiate the debt for you. Or similar to the debt consolidation company, you can pay a certain fee each month and then they'll wait till they get a bulk of money and then they'll call up a debt collection company and try and settle out the account. And they'll, in that case, I've had so many debt negotiating companies call me, and let's say you had a $3,000 balance and you had $1,000 to pay. The debt negotiation company will call you and say, "Hey, we got $1,000. Are you willing to settle the account?" It's that simple. That's all they'll say. And then I'll tell them, I remember as a debt collector, no, we need this dollar amount. And all they'll do is hang up the phone, go back to you as a consumer and tell you, hey, they're wanting X amount of dollars to set out the account. When you get that money, let me know. But not only do you have to pay the X amount of dollars, you're going to have to pay whatever fee they have. And typically it's 20% of that balance on top of what you owe. And a lot of times you may negotiate a 50% settlement, but after the fee and so forth, you end up only getting 30 cents off. A 70%, instead of 50% off, you end up paying 70 cents on the dollar. So 70% of that balance, including your fee. With Debt Negotiator Pro, it's the exact same thing that they would do, except for there's a little more information and stuff that you're going to do as far as your negotiations go. So that if you do get it down at that fee, depending on how much debt you have, and most of those companies, let me remind you, you're paying per account. In this case, you pay a one-time fee. You become part of a Facebook group, right? And in this Facebook group, in case you come across something that's not covered in the courses, because there's always going to be something. Everything I've ever done, there's always something that you don't think about. All you got to do is type it up in Facebook. I'll be the administrator on that. And as soon as I see that question, I'll definitely answer and help you out in that aspect. And that's for the duration of the time. Now, Debt Negotiator Pro is something that you can use during this time in your life, or if later in life you get hard. Not only that, if you have friends and family. I used to, when I worked as in debt collections, just for friends and family, I would negotiate debt, right? And the knowledge and stuff that I put into Debt Negotiator Pro is so much more than what I had at that time span. And I was still able to get people lower settlements and so forth. So down below, fill out the information. If you're interested in Debt Negotiator Pro, if you're looking at repairing your credit, as well as you have the free letter bundle down below, be sure to check that information out. If you have any questions, put them down in the comment section. I promise I'll answer those questions. Thank each and every one of you guys who has actually logged in and filled out information with regards to that. Make sure you do that. And as I always state to every single one of you guys, you be